COVID-19 all around. The schools have been, all government schools have been closed till the 20th of April. There's another little item here that says that all international schools will also close. This will obviously have an impact not only on the economy but also on local politics. To discuss these politics and economic factors, we've got here Dr. Harsha De Silva. No better person, really, than that to have on this morning program. Good morning to you, Doctor.
Good morning, Faraz.
What's happening then? Sri Lanka is going to be in deep trouble.
It's pretty scary.
Yeah.
But one thing I must say, you know, I'm not willing to sort of discredit the government,
No.
completely. No. They did a good job. I must admit that at the beginning, they took precautions. They were, aware of what could happen. So the start was good. I think if the start was bad, things would have been worse by now. We've still only detected two patients. But I think they made some tactical errors.
Right.
In that, who they were going to quarantine and how they were going to quarantine these people. Now, when you say who, how come only folks who are Sri Lankan origin coming back had to be quarantined? What about those guys who are coming from those countries?
Yeah.
What most countries did was that they didn't distinguish between their citizens coming back.
They distinguish only between people.
People.
Right.
So I just didn't understand that. I still don't understand that. As of this morning, I hear folks from 3 countries have been, arrival has been temporarily suspended. Iran, and some of the 2 countries, Italy and another country. And the second one, I think, that they could have done better is the process of quarantine itself. Instead of dumping everybody in one place.
Yeah.
Keeping them sort of quarantined in their own homes, perhaps, or providing them with facilities that they wouldn't actually be together, and that's what happened in Batticaloa, no? But I think they've now rectified those. So, I don't think we should play any politics at all on this matter. We should all work together and we do multiple things. For instance, our 1990 suicide ambulance. Day before yesterday, we got 90 odd calls saying, look, we think we have COVID-19. And yesterday, 24 hours ending midnight last night, the situation is much worse. And it's come to a point that you need to make sure that you're infected by this. This is an emergency care service. And also we are facing issues in terms of medical equipment. For instance, syringes, face masks, disposable other equipment, because a lot of supplies, a lot of things come from China. Even if it comes from India, India gets quite a bit of raw materials from China.
That's right. I was speaking to a businessman, a Sri Lankan businessman whose primary business is exporting to the United States. His buying offices here, his factories are in Bangladesh and in Laos. And I asked him if there's any impact on his business. He said, of course there is. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I can't get any raw material. It comes from China. Yeah. And so we've got a problem.
Yeah, that's on the export side. That's on the production side. Yeah. I'm talking about the healthcare side. You see, the issue really here is to be able to contain this. Right? And now look at what has happened to the U.S. What has happened to the U.S. is, I was speaking to some people last night in D.C., and they were saying, look, the issue is really the unavailability of test kits. So you have to test these people. If they show the regular symptoms, it looks like just any old flu, right? So that's their issue. But I think the country to follow is Singapore. Country to follow is Singapore. I know because my sister's daughter is at the National University in Singapore, and the precautions these kids have been taking, and the strict control the government of Singapore is really placing in ensuring that the virus or the infected persons are contained. I mean, if you look at the numbers, percentage-wise numbers, you compare Italy and you compare Singapore, I mean, it's hugely different. So I think discipline is key, and the government must have a strategy that is working. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Look at what Singapore is doing and do it here.
In terms of money, we're heading to a real disaster, aren't we?
Oh, that's a completely ugly picture. Huh?
Our stock exchange yesterday was just about struggled to maintain a 5,000 all share index.
You see, Faraz, even the New York Stock Exchange, the circuit breaker hit yesterday.
Yeah.
It lost about 10% of the value in total in the last couple of days because the algorithms go into play. If you recall what happened in the Black Friday, what happened was once the human selling, they lost control. And the algorithms came in, and the derivatives started hitting the sell button. And then the whole thing went into free fall. So even here, now the circuit breaker has hit twice in the last 2 days consecutively. That is not the real issue. The real issue is countries in our cohort, right, with the similar per capita income, similar level of development across the world. Some countries are sort of governed well in terms of, you see, fiscal discipline. Some countries are not. And when crises like this hit, they have unequal sort of impact, on these countries. Countries that are have good fiscal discipline come out of crises reasonably unscathed. The same impact, same effect or same disruption on countries with fiscal, lack of fiscal discipline will cause chaos. I mean, we saw that even in the East Asian crisis in the 90s, why some countries got basically wiped out, while others survived. So Sri Lanka is not a country with fiscal discipline, and we've seen that in the last so many months. So in our face, how the so-called tax adjustments that were supposed to bring relief to the people ended up with. I mean, this is what the government is saying. I told you when it first happened that the expected loss of revenue will be around 400 billion. But they said, no, it will be about 200 billion. Now they are saying it may be close to 500 billion, which means we are just empty, right?
How does one control this? They must have had a plan. They're not sort of knowingly going into a 400 billion minus situation.
No, they didn't have a plan.
They didn't have a plan?
No, they didn't have a plan. And I'm telling you...
This is just politics then?
It was just politics. You see, I told you last time when one of the occasions I was here, that even the most senior people in the Treasury got to know about it by text message, via text message. So it was done at the President's office, and sort of Secretary Treasury probably knew, But there was no analysis, there was no study by the finance minister, and I tell this with responsibility. So they just did it, right? And they had hoped that so the trickle down will happen, and trickle down hasn't happened. And more often than not, these tax cuts don't necessarily have a
But
positive.
how are we going to manage? It's a serious situation. And you can see that the government are appearing to pass on the opportunity to reduce fuel taxes because clearly they need the extra money.
The government is unable to pass any revenue reducing measure to the people now. But they will do something because it's election and they're under heavy pressure.
Yeah.
Because we haven't seen such low oil prices in decades.
That's right.
Right? I mean, it's in the 30s, right? So it is really, I mean, completely what is called, there is no social justice in this. You know, my colleague in Parliament, Dr. Bandula Gunawardena, always says, බදු වල සාධාරණත්වයක් තියෙන්න ඕනේ. බදු සාධාරණ වෙන්න ඕනේ. So, I mean, whatever criticism people have of Mangala's formula had a component of social justice in it.
Right.
Right. So when prices fell globally, that a certain amount of that benefit accrued to the consumer. Now, obviously, that's not happening because the government is trying to scrape every rupee it can because there's under heavy pressure.
I noticed this morning's reports that hotel rooms, the occupancy rates have gone down to about 40% now.
Yeah, I mean, that is not surprising. I mean, unfortunately, the travel industry has had now 2 hits.
Yes.
You know, after the bombings of 21 April, and then government, when we were in office, did all what we could to help the industry and the associated service.
Are those measures now kicked in now?
And they've kicked in because anyway from 1 April to 31 March 2020, which means a few more weeks down the road, they got a moratorium. So they didn't have to pay back the loans. Also got under Enterprise Sri Lanka, you know, reasonable amounts on working capital loans and so on. But now I understand that deadline has been extended. Obviously it has to be extended because the tourism industry is going through another crisis. So yes, the confidence levels have completely got eroded. I mean, look at what the rupee was trading spot yesterday, 183 plus, right? I mean, if you look at the buying and selling rates, put a margin on either side. I mean, I don't want to play politics, but I mean, you know, people were very critical of, you know, when we had to go through tough times.
Yes, but when you say that, you know, you look at the damage done when since 2015 in terms of the exchange rate. It sort of went from 131 to the current, almost current levels, about 181, 182. And in rupee terms, the debt went through the roof, quite literally.
Yes, I mean, you know, you got to look at all these things in context. The reason for the depreciation of the currency in the short term, obviously, is, you know, various things that happen either locally or internationally, crises that one has to face. But in the medium to longer term, it is about our exports. I mean, when we came to office in 2011, you know, exports to GDP was the lowest in the 3 or 4 decades, right? And now it has come back up a bit, but not good enough. But it is on the rise. So that's a positive. But if you add service exports to the goods, it has now We were trying to meet a $20 billion target, but fell a little bit short of it. The other thing is obviously the large foreign borrowings. And we were very clear. We showed, look, these years, coming years, 2021, 2, 3 are going to be absolutely tough.
Do you think that the honourable brothers are now ruining the day that they decided to try and take on the government away from the Apalanists and are now finding themselves in a huge rut?
I mean, there's one silver lining, and that is the new legislation we passed last year. That is called Active Liability Management Act. 2018 or 19, I can't recall exactly. I mean, I know this for a fact. When we were about to present this bill in Parliament, the president was told by certain people, don't let that happen, don't let them do this, and he stopped it, right? But then subsequently, in fact, I was sent to see him with Indrajit, Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy. Indrajit and I sat with the president for about an hour, and we explained to him, look, Mr. President, what we are trying to do is simply this. Sometimes global interest rates drop for various reasons, and we should be able to take advantage if that happens, because we are at a very critical level in terms of debt repayment, right? So debt sustainability is a problem, and our constitution only allows us in the budget to borrow that amount that is necessary to pay that year.
Indeed.
Which is kind of silly, you know, because you cannot then actively manage your liabilities. You see what I'm saying? If I know that I have to pay X amount next year, and I am expecting interest rates globally to go up, right? I still have to wait till next year and interest rates to go up to be able to borrow next year. You see? Or else, let's say I have some high cost debt.
So I see what you're saying. What you're saying is that our laws don't permit us to borrow long term at the low rates.
That's right. It didn't. And then we introduced this law. Finally, the president agreed with Indrajit and I when after we explained, and he let it come into cabinet, and whoever was in cabinet, I think Prime Minister's cabinet paper that was, or Mangila's, I don't recall, and we got it passed in Parliament with difficulty. So now the government has that tool.
Right.
And after 150 years, US treasuries, 10-year treasuries have fallen below 1%.
So how possible is it for Sri Lanka to refinance, reschedule, and to borrow big amount of money, maybe $50 billion at 30 years, settle the expensive debts, and then move forward?
This is what I'm telling the government to do. Only I'm telling this.
Right.
Right? You see, when I was running the treasury at DFCC in 1996 or so, there was a fallout between us and the World Bank and ADB because Madam Chandrika promised to liberalize banking laws, and that's another story. And they cut the credit line.
Right.
Okay? And when the credit line was cut, long-term borrowers like the Development Finance Corporations didn't have a proper treasury.
Right.
They had borrowed, from these international institutions, FMO, DG, World Bank, ADB, etc. And when that pipeline stopped, they had no money. Both these development banks then had to go to the market and borrow, even sort of overnight, week, month, 3 months. And the cost of borrowing climbed from, say, 3-4% to 30, 40, 50, 60%. And I'm telling you, one particular day it was 103%. That was the highest overnight call rate registered in this country, and it happened, I believe, in 96. And then we had to somehow borrow over the term to be able to bring down the average cost, right? And I came to the board and I told them, look, this is 96. I said, I want to borrow ₹1 billion from NSB. And the board asked me, Harsha, at what rate? I said 20.5%. They fell off their chairs. They said, Harsha, are you mad? How can you borrow ₹1 billion for 20.5%? This is 1996,
Yeah,
long time ago,
long
right?
time ago.
Then I showed them, look, this is how I'm going to utilize this money, because I got so much of high-cost borrowing, short-term high-cost borrowing, right? I settled this short-term high-cost borrowing, and this is my lending plan. I'm not going to keep this money under the bed, right? I'm going to utilize this money that I have excess. They agreed, and we showed profits. So, I mean, I'm just taking sort of an extreme scenario. But Sri Lanka is also faced with a challenge like that. So, this opportunity has come. And Dr. Lakshman, Dr. Jayasundara, Mr. Cabral, all of them who are, Mr. Artigala, Dr. Nandalal, they should all sit down and see whether what I'm suggesting has makes sense.
But will there be an appetite in places where money is available to accommodate Sri Lanka's quest to get a big amount of money at low rates?
I mean, that is, dependent upon the risks that they place on every country, right? So, you see the risk and the risk premium, will range, anywhere between, depending on the confidence levels investors have, between, I don't know, 250 basis points to 400 basis points or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? So, even if you have a 350, 400 basis point risk premium attached to a UC rate of under 1%, you're still borrowing at 4%, 4.5%, as opposed to 8% or 8.5%.
But do you think the work that now faces Messrs. Jayasundara, Cabral, Artigana, and Lakshman is that much more difficult thanks to the dreaded events of 2015 and 2016 of the central bank?
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I mean, these are, totally unexpected, right? And we don't have much contingency money available. You see, there's hardly any. So,
how do you feel, Harsha, as a member of this party, one of the more robust members, and you haven't exactly been mum about various things, from footnotes to everything else. You're up there in the front, what I call in the front line. But how do you feel when you've been at the front line, and do you sit there and look at these newspapers and TV reports and think, oh my God, is that really what happened under our watch?
See, I have always, said what I have to say, whether I want to commend somebody, I have said it. If I want to criticize somebody, not personally, but...
What about this thing, Harsha, when we are looking at the reports, let's say, these cancellation monies that were paid to Airbus, for example. Now, the line minister now says he was left out.
He was left out.
Right. The explanation from the board of Sri Lankan Airlines at the time was, oh, well, we kept the finance minister and the prime minister informed. Hello, excuse me, what happened to collective responsibility?
Yeah, you see, the president appointed Eran and I and a bunch of professionals to look into.
But unfortunately, you were kept sort of below, one step below.
I mean, there's a lot of things.
I don't know whether it is your appearance on Face the Nation, where you kind of agreed that there was indeed a problem with the bond, that precluded you from going up to that next step, as a cabinet minister.
I mean, I was removed, as you
Yes.
know. I was removed from what I know, what I love to do,
Yeah.
and I was thrown into Siberia,
But
in the foreign ministry.
isn't that the awfulness of this sort of collective of power, the accumulation of power into the one person, into one person's office?
I mean,
I can't think of anything worse than that. When they know that you're good at this, and they go and dump you in something that is, that's demoralizing.
it is. But I took maximum advantage of what I got,
Yeah.
and and that helped me, create this country's, most loved, most efficient service, my Secretariat, and that the expansion of that happened because I was in the foreign ministry and I was able to personally speak with Mr. Modi 3 times in that process. That's a different matter. But what I'm saying is that there are a lot of things that we don't know. Faraz, when we sat in the COP on the bond, we had this much of knowledge.
Yeah.
And those notes that we put are all technical. And why,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of people who don't have a clue of what a bond is, or what a yield curve is, or what a discount is, or what a premium is, started talking absolute nonsense, right? And then this just became something completely political, not technical, right? And
But you can see, Harsha, how this is now impacted. Now, currently, we have your colleague, Ravi Karunaker, being, sort of hunted around for various, whatever it is that W. de Oliveira says is done. Now, can you just imagine? They split the finance ministry into 3. The Minister of Finance says to the state institutions, the interest rate's too high, I want it to come down, so bid low. But the issuing authority doesn't come under him, it comes under his party leader, another minister, who also happens to be the Prime Minister. And then we have the now hapless Kabir Hashim with all the state banks. And then you have the golden nugget. The RSSO comes under the Minister of Finance. The Act comes under him. So can you see the complete malung here?
yes, I mean, I feel for Ravi, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we...
I'm not holding a candle to him.
no,
I'm just explaining.
What I'm saying is this is completely political, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what about everybody else from 2008?
Okay.
Right. I mean, if we are using that report,
Yeah.
right, they should be fair about this.
What's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander.
That's right. Has to be.
Right.
Right. I mean, look. I mean, we may be competing politically and all that. That's not what I'm talking about, right? I don't agree with this, political witch hunt. I mean, 6 weeks before the election.
Yeah.
Right? So then they have to go after all these people. Why only, selected people? So that's another matter. But what you're saying is absolutely true. The Monetary Law Act has to be amended.
Yeah.
And I have been pushing for this. Right? I have been a proponent of amending the Monetary Law Act from ever since I came back in 94. That's 26 years ago. I have written about this. Right? Because of the fiscal dominance of monetary policy, basically, that I have been writing journal articles. I've been, speaking to the Sri Lanka Economics Association, speaking at various fora, lecturing in universities, because there is a conflict of interest inside the central bank. The central bank's job is monetary policy and regulation of the financial system. It has nothing to do with the agency function of borrowing money for the treasury. It has nothing to do with managing a $1 trillion plus or couple of trillion fund of a pension fund of private sector workers. It has no relevance to the central bank. So on the one hand, the public debt department must be taken out of the central bank and be, set aside as an independent debt office. That independent debt office should try to manage the liabilities.
The track record, though, must frighten the people. They'll say, "Oh my God!" Now they'll have an independent thing. If you have the same corruption elements that went on the central bank over there, then we'll be well and cooked.
No, I don't think so. I mean, it is, when I say independent, because of the conflict of interest, Faraz.
No, I can understand the conflict.
Because on the one hand, the agency function currently with the public debt department is to borrow at the lowest possible rate for the treasury.
Correct.
The agency function of the EPF in the central bank is to invest the pension fund at the highest possible rate. So how can these two things exist side by side? It can't. So one side wins, right? So ultimately what happens is there's fiscal dominance, and the treasury and all that, the way the monetary board is structured with the secretary of the treasury sitting on the board and so on, one side always wins and the workers lose.
I wanted to ask you this, and so that's why I'm glad you're here this morning. Now, we spoke earlier about these, auto mechanisms that trigger off the closing of trading on the stock market. In the Colombo Stock Exchange, it's 5%. In other places, it will be more or less,
5
depending.
usually. 5 to 7, yeah.
Yeah, depending on the site. In the same vein, why can't we have the similar kind of checks and balances when it comes to the public funds being invested in the stock market, like the EPF funds? When they bought shares at way over the par value of some companies, way over, many times over. There were shares that were 35, 40 rupees. They waited till it went up to the hundreds to buy. And they say, well, that was the price at the time. Excuse me, how about having some of these 5% and, unusual gains, and then you say, no, we're not allowed to do that. We want to see trading at those high levels for some time, or whatever. Some form of checks and balances there.
You're spot on, Faraz. You're absolutely right. In fact, I mean, if you go back and, even on your own channel, how much I've been speaking of the pump and dump program of the particular 2010-11 period.
Yeah.
The stocks that went from, like you said, 35 to 215 and dumped on the EPF at 185. I mean, these guys made money in the billions, right? As nothing was done. Now, in the third report of the third volume of the forensic audit, they go into great detail of who evaluated this. I mean, most of these were rejected by the investment committee of the EPF, right? Almost everything got rejected, but it was reapproved by high authorities. I mean, everything is there, right? So what we see is bad management, perhaps decisions made for reasons other than the reasons that one should have looked at in terms of investing pension funds of employees. So those triggers cannot be public. Those triggers must be internalized, right? And every company, every hedge fund, every money manager will have his or her own internal circuit breakers.
So it's almost a joke when we hear and we read that Sri Lankan Airlines now wants $300 million capital infusion. It's a blessed joke. How much of money has this country's people paid for a utterly poorly managed business? No company in the Maharaja Group will have the nerve, it's another word for that, but let's set that nerve, will have the nerve to put forth a board paper asking for even more money if they've not been able to manage it for successive period of years.
So that's the difference, because Capital Maharaja Group will not be able to tax the people or print the money,
Yeah.
right? And they will always make decisions based on, rationale.
Within the rationale.
Rationale, and one has to convince the board,
Yeah.
look, this is my plan, right? And reasons are these.
Yeah.
But come to Sri Lankan Airlines board, right? Who is the board? Are the board or is the board competent to take the right decisions? Are they? Does it consist of friends and relations?
But that's what it did.
Right? Or are they, professionals? I must say the current board is a very professional outfit.
Agreed.
And they're all successful business people and professionals, lawyers, and I hope they look at it the way that you said. Because the shareholder is ultimately the people.
It's a bit like the Hilton, Harsha.
Sure.
The Hilton Colombo. If you did a real analysis of how much that has cost the people, then the hotel is priceless, because the people have paid so much. They've paid some chap some money for supposedly his activities in connection with that. The majority shareholder hasn't been paid, and the treasury in the meantime is pumping money.
Faraz, look at the Grand Hyatt.
Yes,
I mean, that's a colossal loss.
Yeah.
And that is EPF money.
Yeah.
You know that.
Yes.
And no approval. No approval by the authorities to dump so much, billions of innocent working people's pension fund into that gigantic contraption that is sitting there with no workers, no guests, and no activity, right? So whether it is the people as a whole, or people as working people who pay taxes and their only savings is generally the EPF, have been taken for a damn ride. Right? So, I mean, I was invited to the March 12 movement yesterday, being March 12, 5 years, right?
Yes.
They asked me to make a brief speech, which I took advantage of 5 minutes. And I was sitting next to Sunil, my dear colleague in Parliament, Handunetti. And he told me, Harsha, I don't think I'm going to get re-elected. Right? I think
You told me that yesterday as well.
Who? Sunil?
Sunil.
Yeah.
In the morning.
Right. So you know what my speech was about Sunil. Sunil is a political opponent. But I asked the people, if you don't want to vote for Sunil Handunetti because you don't think he is the right type of politician who needs to be in Parliament, then we've lost this whole game.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, how come? I mean, there's something wrong. If you think people like that, are the ones that must be representing us in Parliament, so that all the things that we are talking about, I may agree with him on certain things, I may not agree with some certain things, but who should be given the responsibility? Who should then be given the responsibility to check on the people who's got responsibility? Right? So what I'm saying is, when we talk about the standard, the quality of people who are making decisions on behalf of the people, has it improved over the last 5 years since the March 12 movement started? Or has it not changed, or has it deteriorated? In my view, it has even deteriorated. People throwing Bibles at other people in Parliament, people throwing chairs at the Honorable Speaker, people throwing chili powder at policemen, people actually physically slapping policemen inside the chamber.
Absolutely disgraceful.
Right?
Absolutely disgraceful.
So these are the people who you're going to vote for. And these are the people who's going to be taking our money, people's money, and making decisions on my behalf, on my kids' behalf. I mean, you got to be smart, right?
I think they should. I've still got Sri Lankan Airlines in my mind. I think they should bring it to the stock exchange. They should list Sri Lankan Airlines.
I have no problem with that. I think, you know, what we really need to do is to be able to, I mean, look at Sri Lanka Telecom,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it has become a success story, hasn't it?
Indeed.
So Sri Lanka government, of course, can hold a dominant share if they wish to,
Yeah.
and you know,
I think dear Ron
reforms.
Fernando has got the short end of the straw. He doesn't get ₹1,000,000.
He told me he gets nothing. But a lot of people don't get anything. Huh,
No, that's right. So he
lot
get
of
200,000
Yeah.
if he wants, but I think he's not taking it.
No, I mean, you know, I know when Dumindra was chairman of the board of the BOI, he didn't even take his car.
Right.
No salary, nothing, right?
Okay.
So a lot of these, I don't think Susanta takes any money. I don't think Ashok takes any money. I don't think any of these guys who've been appointed to chair boards take any.
I have to finish now, but I have to finish, and there's a wonderful question coming from the news editor of the Island newspaper who's watching. Harshit De Silva, will you be contesting the general election on Sajid Premadasa party's ticket?
I am contesting with Sajid Premadasa on the Samagijana Balavega.
SJB.
Yeah, which is an alliance.
But are you going to be a member of the SJB, or are you going to be a member of the alliance through the UNP?
We are all members of the alliance through the UNP.
Okay.
I mean, we are UNP, right? But we are members of the alliance.
What have you done? Have you thrown RW in the out with the water?
No, Sajid's hand is still, you know, extended towards the honourable leader, and you know, there is still time to find a compromise because Sajid set this up because you know, leader told him to, working committee told him to. So if we are, you know, arguing on a you know, trying to split hairs here, are you a party, are you an alliance? You know, these are matters that can be resolved.
Okay, elephant symbol, phone symbol.
Elephant cannot be used because the time to change the symbol has now elapsed. It is the phone. I just called to say
Vote for the SJB.
so to let me finish the question, answer.
Okay.
I'm going to run for office from Colombo. Originally, I was saying, no, I'm going to leave active politics, right? Because I was sick of this.
Yeah.
But the requests have been, you know, fast and furious.
Okay.
And Sajid just wouldn't let me go, right? So I'm going to, after putting 10 years of my life to work for this country, and having achieved something, having delivered some good things, I'm going to put another 5 years for this country. So I'm running from Colombo, and I'm running as a person who has delivered for this country. So thank you. Was it Shamindra?
Shamindra Ferdinando.
So thanks, Shamindra.
Thank you, Shamindra, for that question, for that opportunity. And that's the way it was on this extended version of Newsline Live. Thank you for putting up with us. I hope that Dr. Harshit De Silva has sort of spoken straight from the heart. Think wisely. Think March the 12th declaration. Don't vote in a flippant way. Think, and even think again. Take care, and thank you, Dr. Harshit De Silva. God bless. Cool.
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.